Oh, that was the cue. Hey, happy Friday, guys. We are the last word and getting used to our new studio setup. So, Christy, Courtney, happy Friday, guys, gals.
Happy Friday.
So, I think Courtney, you and I were in the same place, different reasons and meetings. Christy, I think you were at TMBA.
TMBA here in Austin. I didn't even have to get on a plane. I think I'm pretty thankful about that.
Yeah, so let's do the little round robin. Courtney, sadly, you got caught up in phase one of the slowdown, the TSA slowdown. I was one flight ahead of you from DCA to Detroit. We were only 45 minutes delayed. It sounds like you got the worst end of that deal.
I did. And I thought, of course, because that's how like existence works, right? Like, I'm like, I have a flight out tonight. I'm not going to be affected. I actually flew to DC yesterday morning and there was a mechanical failure that kept me on a tarmac for 2.5 hours in the morning. And so I was like, I've already paid the FAA gods. Like,
Yeah.
I am so in the clear on this. And then it was a nightmare at DCA last night.
Well, if that was the morning, it was at the 7 a.m. Detroit yeah. So that's the one that stacked up the rest of the day because that's just a glorified bus that goes back and forth all day long.
Yeah, well, and I think that even like the Delta metric said that it's like 98% on time. And so I thought I was like solid even to show up to the meeting that I was able to attend that day, yesterday.
So 50% of the time, it's 90% on time.
Yeah, something like that. It was really, really high. But I got through. I always pack 2 books, which shows like that's the grand nerd in me, which most people who know me at least appreciate. Everybody's like, you carry 2 books? It's never possible. Yesterday was the reason why we carry 2 books, everyone.
Yes,
Love
I'm with you. 2 books and a sketchbook.
Yeah,
everywhere.
I have a notebook. Not a sketchbook, but I don't have your beautiful skills.
So, Christy, tell us about the TMBA event. I kind of was tracking it from the socials, and it looked like a great venue and a pretty cool set of content that was delivered.
It was a great event, and the content was, I dare say, unique because the approach was a little different than your traditional mortgage conference. And I will say that probably by far the most unique one was the one that we did around LBJ, listening to, he famously recorded many, if not all of his conversations. And so we got to listen to some actual conversations from the president around a few different topics. And maybe the most interesting is the one that his wife hated the most, but his grandchildren loved the most, is a conversation between him and his tailor and the size of his pants in a variety of places. So if you might want to Google that for your own pure entertainment. But it was really interesting to think about the person behind creating the business that we're in today and how the impact that he had, not only on that, but when you learned a little bit more about him, if this is somebody you haven't researched, I don't know that everybody researches all the presidents, just the number of impacts that he had just overall in his philosophy with really being there for the American people. You contrast that with Courtney's experience at, flying out yesterday and how we're having to do reductions in flights and staffing and different things because we have the longest government shutdown in history. So you contrast those things, they look very different. But the topics of conversation, in addition to learning about the president, we talked about M&A. It was so wonderful to have the CEO of Horton come and talk about building and really just take a deep dive into some of the metrics. We had Danielle, who used to be with the Federal Reserve, come and talk about just her view and opinion of what the data looks like and how it's impacting us. And she looks at a few different things than maybe we would all normally look at every day. So very insightful sessions, great walk away. Now the question is, do we get to do it again next year? It's not the 60th anniversary of HUD. However, it was great topics, great speakers. The buzz around it during the day was really great, and even into the next day as we did a senior leader roundtable.
So with the the present day government shutdown, did that impact any of the scheduled presenters or attendees? I have to imagine there was probably some disruption there.
Some significant disruption. We had a couple speakers who were no longer allowed to travel, so we had to do a little bit of shuffling with the agenda. So there was that, and then a number of folks who decided not to risk the travel fairies and the FAA gods, as Courtney put it, to make it. So we had a couple of extra seats. You could have snuck in if you wanted to have driven in, but I do think that this is something that the TMBA should consider doing again next year, because it really broached on not just mortgage, but on the state of real estate, the state of construction, and some general economics that, again, not stuff we normally look at.
Got it. Hey, Courtney, you were in and out of DC yesterday. Is it an event you can talk about?
Well, it is an event that has, they call them, it's very appropriately elitistly, what are it, Chatham's house rules? Like the Vegas, like what says it, but generally speaking, it's a group, it's called the Executive Roundtable. It's a consistent invite only thing where there are, the thing that I like the most about it is that there's front end people, there's commercial people, there's regulators, there's, all sorts of things. The idea is to keep it small enough that the conversations are really rich.
Yeah.
And so I always make an effort to do this. I think that this should happen more. It is very hard to curate these rooms. And I understand that, or not firsthand, but when I look around the room, I was like, am I sure that I was on the right email list? They've maybe messed that up. Maybe it was a C, and they're like, oh shoot, we invited her, So I'm so grateful for that. But it's a group that gets together twice a year. It's pretty consistent. We talk sometimes on here about coming up in mortgage and, how hard it is to get in the room sometimes and things like that. I feel like I've been there enough now that people say hello, Courtney, to me, which feels like I belonged to something, which is cool. But I had an opportunity yesterday, which is near and dear to my heart, to speak. And, I've been asked to talk a lot about the AI thing recently, largely because I think, a lot of vendors want to talk about it. A lot of tech companies want to talk about it. Not a lot of ops folks have really spent time in deployment and the framework of deployment and looking at deploying those things. And I'm grateful for every position that I've had in mortgage that gives me any amount of credibility to speak in that space at this point. But it was really interesting insofar as there were very senior leaders at very large tech companies that were my co-panelists. And so I felt ostracized once again. That reminded me that I was probably accidentally on the invite list. But it was a really, really interesting dialogue that I would take this away from, right? I think people continue to, and there was a specific person in the room that inspired this thought. So this is no thoughts are original anyway. So anyway, I just like to give credit where credit's due. I think that we have to, if we want to have really valuable conversations about the AI and mortgage, I think we have to get a lot more specific about what we're talking about, right? Yeah. So people continue to talk about in any presentation. I have not seen a presentation that went as deep as where we went with this yesterday, because we started getting really specific and the room got a little hostile, which was really interesting, right? Because people had their positions, right? Yeah. And the project that I've been working on for the last 2 years with CMG is really unique insofar as I got to take a white piece of paper and design something that could be beneficial, not just for the servicing process, but for a mortgage entity if they were going to invest in the correct data model, right? And when you get to think about something with a clean piece of paper, it's a totally different initiative than I'm already sailing the boat and what's going on, right? And so I tried to look at it from a completely clean, completely messy, and what's a middle ground that you could think of from a total strategic roadmap, deployment, whatever, right? And then most of the other people that were talking with me, they had a bias towards selling something. And so I think it gets a little bit muddy there. But I think that, you know, what I took away from it is that I think more valuable AI discussions have to be separated into maybe an entity strategy discussion, maybe a fragmented deployment model, like quick fixes in AI, and what does that look like, right? Long-term investment strategies in these types of technologies, and different strategies you can take depending upon the type of organization you have. There was a really interesting panel that you would have liked, Brian, about a series of companies that are in the sales space who have made a lot of investment in their consumer front end, right? But you know, the proletariat is always left behind, like us in ops. You know, we've always got to like glue things together. We're like licking this and holding it together over here and like hoping it sticks together. But there's some really interesting stuff that's happening in the pure consumer space, right? Aside from ops. And then one of the guys on the panel said, oh, this really big fancy MSR owner, they did this in 6 months. And I was like, okay, but let's talk about the truth about that. You're talking about somebody that owns assets. They're only interested in binary data, right? They're not interested in the, and I think from a MISMO perspective, it would have been really interesting, right? To be involved in this type of dialogue. And so, yeah, I think that we have to stop talking about AI as a theme. Like there's a million subsets of that we really have to get into to have these meaningful conversations. And it was an interesting beginning yesterday.
Yeah, I kind of described at MBA in talking with a group about like where are we as an industry as it relates to AI, even though it's been around for a long time, right? The models and whatnot. We're probably like in the first inning if we're going to use like a baseball, you know, analogy. And for all kinds of reasons, because we're seeing it used in so many different parts of the manufacturing process, including way up funnel and including as an ongoing, you know, kind of strategy for engagement and everywhere in between. And I love the fact that you kind of described who was in the room generically, including, you know, representatives from the regulator side of the business, because that's a big issue right now that we face as an industry is how do we embrace these tools that we believe will help us with efficiency and help us better serve consumers and create a better experience, all the stuff. But how do we do that in a way that's responsible and doesn't get us in trouble unexpectedly? And so I love when there's conversations that include all the players, the lenders, the providers, the regulators. That way we can kind of all get on the same page and kind of figure this thing out together. And that's why I like where we're at. And I do think we're early in this space, and hopefully there's more of these type of conversations that you know happen going forward so that people can embrace it and feel good about it and not be looking over their shoulder, you know, from a you know, regulator perspective.
I still think we have to look over our shoulder from a regulator perspective. I mean, again, we're in the middle of a government shutdown. We have polarized views of the regulatory environment and people taking different approaches to how they see whether or not rules are going to continue, should rules be followed. And then you have states stepping into the mix and creating a patchwork environment that could be avoided should we have clearer rules. And there's just not a lot of agreement, or it doesn't appear that there's a lot of agreement about what the regulations should be and where in the process that should happen, specifically in terms of how we engage with consumers. So I worry a little bit about the regulators, regardless of having them in the room and the clarity that we get at that particular moment that may not exist again in another year or two.
So I would have told you 3 weeks ago, I would have probably felt I did feel the exact same way, Christy, and now kind of 3 weeks in my new role, and I should be fully immersed based on the, you know, my first like day 3 at MBA annual, just thrown into the fire, and then this week in DC all week with the MISMO team, also with Team MBA. But yesterday I got the chance to spend a bit of time with the team from the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, the CSBS. So like, if you think of NBA, their members are lenders, right, of all sizes and shapes, et cetera. The CSBS, their members are the state regulators. And so, and we've had these conversations. MISMO and CSBS are partnered in an initiative that I'll talk about a little bit here. But there is a focus among the state regulators coming together on, within CSBS to create some efficiency for themselves. They're challenged with a lot of the same challenges lenders are as well, as far as resources or lack thereof, and funding, and trying to find tools and ways to be more efficient, more effective. And what MISMO and CSBS have kind of locked arms on is the newest standard published under MISMO, which is the Mortgage Compliance Dataset, MCD. And if you think of that data set, that's essentially the standard that's been created. If we can fast forward to kind of the art of the possible, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, whatever you want to call it, there's a world where most, if not all, states use that same standard, and that becomes the data that they use for their selection criteria for their, the loan level pulls that they're going to do. In talking with a lender about their challenges, this was a 40-state lender who had just wrapped up like a 15-state, audit, 15 unique states. And across those 15 states, they described having to create 15 unique data sets with different titles and labels and all the stuff. And in their estimation, if they were able to have a standard that they could have created one time and shared with 15 states, that in this case would have freed up 25-30% of their compliance resource. That starts to get real fast when you think about some of these larger lenders. So again, 3 weeks ago, I would have been a little bit, is there really going to be, the states coming together? But just kind of seeing a little bit of the sausage making process, I'm optimistic. And from my current seat, really pleased with the work that the teams have done together to get to this spot. And somewhere, I don't know where, we're in this new production environment, but hopefully as you're watching this, you'll see a link. So if you want to learn about this upcoming tech sprint, December 3rd, it's free, it's virtual, so you don't have to travel anywhere and worry about TSA. It's within your budget, it's free. Anybody can join and learn, what's going on this tech sprint, and it's a great way to kind of see how the entities are coming together to solve big problems for industry. Oh, it looks like Bob weighed in. Bob Nemi, hello, Bob. Bob says states are not, quote unquote, stepping in. They have all been in the mix since 2010, but they are stepping up their game to be more like mini CF. Yeah, you got it. CFPBs.
Well, it's not only that they're mini CFPBs, right? All the people that left the CFPB have gone to states, some big nasty ones, and have picked up where they left off, right? At their former post, right? To proceed with. And I think that for the mortgage industry, that's much scarier, and we should be scared, right? I hope that there's a non-egoic approach that the states can unify on, something more akin to, not to bring up any fears for anybody that's out there, but like the national mortgage settlement or things like that, where there at least is a single standard, right? For something. I mean, I know that entire entities change their strategic footprint to which regulator they feel like they want to, be under, right? In order to, manage the risk side of the house, which might not have the same intensity these days with the CFPB on pause. But, if you think about it, the states have had a little less than a year to organize. And I think that we would be remiss not to think that in 2026 that we're going to see some meaningful investigations that no one's going to talk publicly about and not compare notes about. And so maybe we'll hear two years from now, we'll hear about how bad 26 is.
I hope not.
Me too.
So, Christy, I'm curious on the event, the TMBA event. I've been to many TMBA events. They are definitely they do a great job in terms of, first of all, the members rallying together and coming together. What did attendance look like in terms of like the roles and responsibilities within the lender organizations? I still see far too few front end, production representation at these events.
I would agree with you. And while you had some of that, you had some of the standards of what you would see. One of the things I think Rihanna Boland does really, really well is her women's events and making sure that she's reaching out to people in the cities that we're in that would normally not attend events. And she put together something truly special this time with having, Alana McCargo and Faith Schwartz come and really have a great conversation with women. And, it's a women's event, much like Empower. Men are invited and have the opportunity to be included, though not that many show up. But what an interesting way to spend some time, particularly if you're a frontline employee. How often do you get to sit and talk to somebody like Alana McCargo or a Faith Schwartz, titans in the industry that have had huge, huge impacts? And so you do see more frontline folks at those events, and that is very intentional. The cost is significantly lower.
Yeah.
They're promoting it to people who don't have to travel. Not quite the same as a free webinar. There is a little bit of a cost, but there's also some food and some interaction, and you get to be belly to belly with folks. But when you got to the actual event, you still saw some of that normal disbursement that you're talking about. And I would be really interested in understanding how we could grow that and get people involved, because we're not building the next generation of leaders. You've got a group, as we look at the secondary conference that Texas puts on, that is coming up in, sooner than we would like to believe, right? February, March kind of timeframe. And they're looking at creating a special piece of the event that is more for frontline employees. And so we're putting a lot of effort into that because MBA puts effort into their impact, right? It's how do we get people under 35 that are newer to the industry? Because those folks have a whole different perspective. And I don't want to say bias, but they have a whole different perspective to bring, but they also haven't been through. You can have been in the business, we've talked about this before, for a decade, and you got in post-financial crisis. And so a lot of that learning and experience, we've got to figure out how to pass on to this upcoming crop of leaders so that we don't find ourselves in the history is doomed to repeat itself because we don't remember how we got there.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to the MBA Mortgage Bankers Association. If you look at my email, it does say, bvieaux@mba.org now. So, a lot of loan officers don't realize that if their company is a member of MBA, that as an employee of a company that's a member of MBA, you're a full member. As an individual, right. You're a full member and you have access to all of the content that's available as a member on the MBA's, website. And there is a ton of content, education opportunities for loan officers. MBA and David Uppin and the team have really focused over the years on building content and curricula that's focused for loan officers. And we still have opportunity to have more of those participate. So shout out for David and his team and the content that's there. But this is where I also see the state level, the local kind of chapters stepping up and being a extension resource for loan officers and even, operations staff that don't tend to get out to some of the bigger events. And MMLA, that's kind of my home base organization. We do a lot of content that's geared directly to production, sales. We have a sales summit that we do every year. Then we have some ops related content and events that we do specific for processing, closing, underwriting, et cetera. And so, if you're out there and you're on the production side of the house and you're a member of MBA, or your company is a member of your state local, check it out, because you have some access to content that you probably didn't even know you had at your fingertips.
And go teach yourself a piece of the business that you don't already know. Like, one of the things that I think about from our industry is we have a lot of spider webs or tentacles that go into a lot of things. And if you really want to understand your role, you also have to understand what other people do. Courtney is great at bringing this up and talking about, hey, we're over here on the servicing side, but there's things that happen on the origination side. And we have to learn how each piece of the business works, because what we do can impact what Courtney does, and what Courtney does can impact what our capital markets team has to do. And it can impact our risk team. Like, we all interplay together. And if you don't educate yourself, and you're right, MBA puts out some great materials where you can spend an hour on a webinar at your convenience, instead of maybe a little less time on TikTok and a little more time on MBA, binge watching some of that content.
So, unpopular opinion?
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. I think that maybe MISMO should only focus on state requirements or other, because in mortgage, the capitalism keeps getting in the way. And in mortgage, we continue to have short-term financial plans, or me first financial plans, question mark whether collaboration does work. And maybe the way to have an effective strategy is to have a single standard. I say this too because you're just kind of putting together a lot of the pieces that we're talking about here. There were also some former regulators in the room yesterday, not just regulators, right, who really highlighted the pain that some of these governmental organizations have when they don't have enough funding to even catch up to where mortgages from a technology perspective, let alone to the AI, right? And how much more forward these entities could be, or efficient they could be, not to get too doji, but I'll bring that up because KP's not here, so somebody should, right? Oh, look he actually likes my idea.
Yeah, he loves it. Love that, Courtney.
My relationship with KP is a perfect example about how two people can come from totally different planets and still let the intelligence flourish in the middle, right? And so maybe that should be where MISMO puts all of its energy. And I'm not saying to regulate more, but if you could get a collaborative data effort in places that gave mortgage the lift, then mortgage would be, they would have to comply to a certain extent. Because I think that, I've sat in some collaborative rooms at different organizations, and I'm happy to collaborate whenever, right? But at the end of the day, which is the same problem with the AI right now, everyone's looking for a right now return on investment to whatever the thing is. Otherwise, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like that's just a truth. And so if we keep smoking the kind bud and thinking that everyone's going to get in a room and we're going to come up with the best idea and whatever, if it's not impacting the bottom line of that entity, and by the way, if you're not in a room of the CEOs of that entity, the people in that room are unlikely going to be able to shift the entire thinking and strategic process and investment strategy of that entity. I don't know. I'm a big fan of the state effort.
Courtney, that's an episode of the new MISMO Mic'd Up podcast that will be releasing soon. So I'm gonna
really? Did you guys already do that? See, there's no original thought.
No. You and I are gonna do that show.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, did I copy from something I heard?
You did not. No, this is a whole separate conversation. I'm putting you on the list, coming after you.
I said, this is now you have been voluntold.
That's right.
Okay, cool.
You raised your hand and there you go.
I have such cool friends. All my friends are so fun.
Well, we managed to get to the bottom of the hour again on this Friday, and I know folks want to get back to their scheduled events, and I always enjoy these weekday wrap-ups, and missed KP today, but he listened in and gave us some good commentary along the way. Guys, we'll be back here next Friday. Thanks for tuning in. Christy, Courtney, have a great rest of the Friday and an awesome weekend. See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Well, there.
The Lions.